There's a saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. If you have a product that's crushing it, you're going to have new entrants and stop and do the 80-20. What 20% produce 80% of the results? Do more of that. I place a huge significance on net income. You don't buy groceries with revenue. There's an exercise called fail on paper. Great products, enough profit margin, unless they're priced 3 times landed cost or more, I will not sell that product.
What if the very strategy you stopped doing was the key to getting back to growth? Imagine going from the brink of bankruptcy to launching 2 new products a month and commanding an empire of over 1,000 ASINs on Amazon. Welcome to today's episode of your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, and my guest today is David Schomer, CEO of Build, Grow, Scale. David is a true expert in turning e-commerce stores into profit machines, and he spent 15 years helping businesses scale their revenue predictably. But before he found the key strategy that truly worked, David faced the kind of plateau that many business owners face, where more hustle just isn't working anymore, and expenses were rising faster than revenue. His business hit a wall, growth stalled, and frankly, had he not acted, he would have gone bankrupt. But by leveraging one of the core strategies we talk about in your business growth playbook, he didn't just survive, he soared. David transformed his stagnant business into one that is consistently back to growth again and again. Joining me as David shares his battle-tested systems and how focusing on one key strategy became his blueprint for predictable, profitable scaling. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. Really excited to be here.
So, e-commerce is a busy space. It seems like products get commoditized and there's like this race to the bottom, but you chose to get into the world of e-commerce. Can you take us into the Wayback Machine? When you first launched your e-commerce business, like why did you get into that space? Why you? Why then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in rural Iowa, and around 2002, which is very early for e-commerce, my family started ordering parts for our tractor off eBay Motors. And I had this aha moment as a kid that, typically we would spend half a day driving into town to pick up parts for the tractor or find out they were out of stock. But instead with eBay Motors, we could order, and in a couple days, that part would show up for the exact make and model of tractor that we had. And it just seemed to me like a better shopping experience. And to me, I grew up in a small town. I currently live in Festus, Missouri, which is a population of 13,000, and have always viewed e-commerce as a way for me living in a small town to have access to products that people living in New York City would have. And so I've really liked it on the consumer side of things. Now, when I got to college, I bought all my textbooks for the first semester. And at the end of that semester, there were vans that would line up on the side of campus, and they'd buy your books back. And I did not sell mine. However, I sold mine on Amazon.com back then. And that was great. I recouped most of the money I'd spent on books. And what I told my friends was, I'll buy your books and I'll give you more than what these people are offering that were patrolling campus in a van. And so I had a pickup truck and would load down that pickup truck with textbooks until my box springs just about touched my tires. And I'd drive home for the summer and I'd sell those books, and I'd come back and I'd give all my friends their cash. And of course I took a cut there. And so that was pretty early on in e-commerce as well. And, but I've always really liked it. To me, I truly believe it's a better way of shopping. It's just a better way to do it. And with reviews and how you can get feedback from thousands of people that bought that exact product, I just don't see brick and mortar retail ever catching up to that. Talking to a salesperson, their odds are they have not used that product. And even if they have, that's one person's opinion. And when you are buying on, say, Amazon, and a product has thousands of reviews, you can read the 5 stars, you can read the 1 stars, and you can see what the group consensus is. And as a consumer, that lowers your risk. that you're making the wrong decision. And so there are just so many things about it that seems to be a better way of doing things. And that's what attracted me to it.
So you got into the e-commerce space, selling, commodity textbooks that every student is now getting rid of. How did you differentiate? Like, why were buyers choosing to buy from you versus other sellers who had arguably the same product?
I think at that point in time, I really wasn't differentiating. That there is such a high markup on textbooks. If you think back to college days, a typical book at a bookstore costs $20, maybe $30 at the top end. For some reason, textbooks can be $600, $700, $800. And so there was just enough meat on the bone in terms of profit margin that I wasn't doing anything to differentiate myself. Now, as I've grown my own private label businesses, that's been an area I've definitely had to sharpen my sword on and differentiate myself from the pack. But I would say there are a lot of e-commerce businesses that don't differentiate themselves and do just fine. And so, not that that's a strategy, but I do think competing on price or competing on how quickly you can ship out are things that people care about, even if your product isn't that different.
It sounds like your start in the space was textbooks, but that's not what you're doing these days. Tell us about what got you into the world of e-commerce that you're in today.
Yeah, so I, right out of college, wanted to run my own business. However, I didn't have any capital and I didn't really have any ideas. And so I went and worked at a corporate consulting firm where I did a couple things. One was mergers and acquisitions. I got to see about 50 businesses be bought and sold. And that was really inspiring to me because one common thread that I noticed of these business owners that, the ones that we were working with were typically $10 million and above. So like very successful. One thing I noticed was they didn't all have Harvard MBAs. They didn't come from, incredible families of wealth. A lot of them just had grit and probably had a little bit higher tolerance for risk than your average person. But I saw it enough to where I said to myself, I can do this. I can do this. And it's going to be hard, but I want to try to do this. And so I worked in that position for 7 years and I learned a ton about business. It was a practical MBA in how to run a business. And during that time, I started a side hustle, which was an Amazon. It was a pet supply store that I was selling on Amazon. And during that time, I had studied for the CPA exam and the CFA exam. CFA exam was 4 years, probably had about 1,500 hours tied up in passing that exam. And my study schedule was from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. And then I'd go to work. And when I got done with that, I had been in the mode of waking up at 4 a.m. and going to work at 7. And I wanted to do something productive with that time. And so what I filled that time with was a side hustle. And I built that company up to a point where I could exit my job and do that full time. And during that time, I documented my journey on a podcast called Firing the Man, where I documented my journey of being a full-time employee all the way through quitting my job or firing the man, as we like to say, and then running my e-commerce business full time. And so I've had that podcast for 6 years. We put out a new episode every Tuesday. We've never missed a Tuesday, and knock on wood, and have really enjoyed it. And so, but yeah, in a nutshell, that's my story.
There's two things you shared there that I want to tease out for our listeners that I thought were really interesting, right? One is that you saw all these businesses being bought and sold. And that sort of gave you the comfort that like, this is a thing and you can do it too. And like sometimes we need to do something enough to convince ourselves we can do it. And other times we surround ourselves with others and we see something happen enough that we believe we can do it. So that's really neat that you had that unique opportunity to be around all these sales and see what that's like and how you can have a business too. So that's really cool. The second thing I think is really neat there is with your Firing the Man podcast, you went from having this little side hustle while still working a job and you documented in public. You showed the world like, hey, here's what I'm doing each step of the way, and really built up quite a great platform by showing what you were doing on your journey. So kudos on that. And for our listeners, like those are two really helpful things that you can do as well. So nice, David. So when you were building that business up, and scaling from now having fired the man and launched your business. What were some of those earlier wins? Like, how did you know you were making it and you were doing well?
I'll tell you what, I remember my first sale, and it was a dog collar. And I remember I was doing self-fulfilled. I didn't know about FBA yet. And I remember marching in to the post office with my chest puffed out, knowing that I was going to be going to the post office a lot more to drop off orders. And to me, that first win was that first sale, and knowing that I could do this. And so, and I would say slowly but surely, just, continue to launch products, continue to, add variations. And that particular business, as a side hustle, had 300 SKUs by the time that I was ready to fire the man and go out on my own. You hear a lot of people say, like, I want to run my own business. I'm going to quit my job and run my own business. And I can tell you, having done that, you're going to be way better off if you build it as a side hustle first and get it to become a cash flowing asset, and then jump off. Because, in the early years, you need money for reinvestment. You need money for inventory. And if money for inventory and money for your mortgage are competing, you will not grow that company.
Well, just some of those earlier wins, like you were saying about that first check coming in and getting it to be a cash flow producing asset.
So I would say that was one of the earliest wins, and it has not been an overnight success. It has been a series of chess moves, thousands of chess moves, that have led to the business getting to where it is today. It's a business that I still own, and it was a lot of baby steps. I didn't have revenue of 0 one month and $1,000 the next month. It was, 100, and then 200, and then 300, and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And so one of the most notable wins was firing the man, was quitting my job. And I'll tell you, so it was a CPA firm. And as I mentioned, I had my CPA. I'm a very risk averse person. And so it may seem funny that I run my own businesses, which tend to carry a higher risk profile. But I was very methodical about, having 6 months of expenses put away in the bank, and, replacing my salary at my current job by a factor of 3. So I had plenty of money for reinvestment and paying myself. And, it went from this thing that I was doing between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. To, my full-time job. And that was really, really exciting to me. And when I started it, I would have told you in a year, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to do this full-time. And it took 3 years. And I'm thankful for that, because I learned a lot along the way. And, in business consulting, you're telling businesses what they ought to do. And so when I was running my own business, I would just do that. I would take the advice that we were given to clients, and I'd implement it in my own business. And what I tell people who are dissatisfied with their job, I will always say there's 2 forms of compensation. One is the cash that goes in your account, every 2 weeks. But the second is experience. And to me, experience is really more valuable than that cash compensation. It really sets you up to do great things. And so, to me, the definition of a dead end job is where you feel like you're undercompensated and you're not learning or growing. And if if you're listening to this and you feel like you're in that boat, it may be time to make a change. You may feel undercompensated, but be learning a ton. And that is not a bad situation to be in, at least temporarily. And so that was really helpful for me, is getting that practical experience and, learning how meetings run and how teams run and what real leadership looks like. And all of those things helped me be successful.
That's really cool. So what I'm hearing is that the overnight success was years in the making. And that at first it's $100 a month and a 2 and a slow ramp up until you got to the point. I love the CPA part of your mindset, where you wanted to make sure you had 6 months runway in the bank and that you had 3x what you're earning in the job coming in cash flow wise before you felt ready to fire the man. Really smart. So that's some good growth, David. But we talk about plateaus a lot and how these are not something that you can avoid per se in business, but you can expect and plan for and then work with. When did things for you slow down? Like, where did you get stuck?
I would say if you were to graph out the growth of the business, you could probably identify 4 to 5 plateaus. I do think it's something that naturally can happen in a business. And, one of the things, and I'll say this about e-commerce, but I think this would probably hold true in a lot of different industries, is the more things you have to sell, the higher likelihood there is of you making a sale. And I kind of view it as fishing hooks in the water. If you have one SKU, you have one fishing hook in the water. If you have 300 fishing hooks in the water, certainly some of those are going to be duds, but some of them aren't. And you're able to learn what's working and what's not. And so one consistent theme about any of the plateaus that I've been in and how I've been able to get out of them has been on product launches. And that can be a challenge, especially when you have cash flow constraints. And I can talk about some specific strategies that I've utilized to overcome those cash flow constraints. But launching products has been one that if I've paused in 3 to 6 months, when I'm looking at my P&L, I'll feel it. And but the opposite is true. If I'm taking action in 3 to 6 months, my P&L is going to look good, and it's going to be because of my actions from the past. And so, I would say launching products is one of the biggest ones.
So when you got stuck and you felt that stagnation, was that because you weren't launching new products?
Yeah, and I think to people that have run their own businesses, and I'm going to use a specific example here. If you have a business that does $200,000 in revenue in year 1, and it does $400,000 in year 2, most people would assume that business owner is cash flow rich. However, I can tell you that business owner is cash flow poor because, at least this has been my experience, is you have a cash conversion cycle. So a lot of people go to China or abroad who are selling in the US. They're going to place a PO, and it is going to be about 120 to 150 days before they have a sellable asset. Now, there's some exceptions to the rule with air freight, but just generally that. You're going to make a sale, and you'll have PPC expenses, but you'll make a sale. Amazon's going to wait 2 weeks to pay you out. And what you're going to need to do is go order more inventory because you're doubling. And so the cash flow constraints is often something that tends to kind of put the brakes on growth. And so, I'd mentioned a couple specific strategies, and I think those would be worth getting into. One of the things is low MOQ orders. I can tell you, if I look at out of 10 products that I launch on Amazon, 3 of them are going to do great. 4 of them are going to do okay. 3 of them are going to be duds. I've launched over 1,000 products on Amazon, and you'd think my percentage would be getting higher, but it's around 30% win rate. And so if you think of that like a blackjack table, a low MOQ supplier is like playing at the $5 table, whereas a high MOQ supplier is like playing at in the back room where it's expensive to play each hand. And one of the things that I've found is suppliers often put MOQs, minimum order quantity, on their websites. Those are always negotiable. And I've had companies I've reached out to who have had MOQs stated as 1,000 units, and my first order is 50. And I'm willing to pay a little bit more for those 50 because the net cash outflow is a lot less than ordering that 1,000. And I have had plenty of duds that are in my basement or in my warehouse that are a constant reminder of this, is don't order 1,000 units starting out. If you go out of stock, it's not the end of the world. You always want to try to avoid it. But so that's been one. Negotiating payment terms is another one. And, usually suppliers will start off with like a 50% deposit, 50% when it ships. And I always try to hold on to my cash for as long as I can. If I can get to a 20% deposit, maybe 40% when it ships and 40% on arrival, that's going to speed up my cash conversion cycle. And that really makes a difference. There are instances where I would prefer better payment terms than a discount because of your cost of capital. And so I would say the third thing that's helped is U.S. manufacturers. And typically your turnaround time, it's not going to be sitting on a boat for 60 days. It may be coming out of, somewhere in the U.S. And typically they're more willing to do low minimum order quantities, and just be logistically, you're not moving that product as far. And so labor rates are a little higher in the U.S. Sometimes it ends up being more expensive, but in the long run, finding a good U.S.-based manufacturer is huge. And, they often like to grow with you. And I've got a couple great relationships with one particular company in Ohio that I've helped them grow. They've helped me grow. When they have good ideas, they bring them to me. And when I have ideas, I bring them to them. And we're partners and are rowing the boat in the same direction. So, those are three ways that I think help overcome that cash flow problem.
To summarize what I'm hearing there, David, it sounds like you guys got stuck. And that was, I think, where many businesses are, being like a one-trick pony. One product that's crushing it and doing really well, but not diversifying and launching more products like you guys did. And secondly is not understanding that cash conversion cycle of what it takes to make money. And especially with physical goods like you're talking about, negotiating the terms, getting your lower minimum order quantities, your MLQs, looking towards U.S. manufacturing. All those help shorten up that cash flow cycle and get a business back into positive cash flow, which is what you've done. Had you not figured this stuff out, right? Had you remained with just the winning products you had, what would have the world looked like? Staying plateaued or not continuing that growth cycle?
There's a saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that is true in a lot of industries, and particularly in e-commerce. And let me illustrate this with an example. So if you take an Amazon course, one of the first things they're going to talk about is product research. And there are a lot of really good online tools. And even on the consumer side of things, you can see on Amazon, 2,000 sold in the last month. And that's the starting spot for most e-commerce sellers, is looking at the data. I am the same way. And so what ends up happening is if you have a product that's crushing it, people will see that will stand out, and you're going to have new entrants into the market. And so I've had this happen where there's a unique product. I'm the first one to market. You search for that keyword, I'm on the top of page one. And then in a year, I've got 15 competitors. And so a hero ASIN or hero SKU really has a shelf life. And it has been my experience that shelf life may be, 4 to 6 years. But it is hard to stay on top. And so if you don't have products in your pipeline, that hero SKU won't be your hero SKU for sure in 10 years. And so, constantly innovating and constantly trying to make a better mousetrap really pays dividends.
So you're a CPA, you're a numbers guy, you love your numbers. Looking back, do you feel earlier on you were more focused on the gross sales, or were you looking at profitability? I mean, we touched on cash flow a bit, but what were those things you were looking at to see how well you were doing?
Yeah, I place a huge significance on net income. I place very little significance on revenue. And, I always say you don't buy groceries with revenue. You buy it with net income. And so that's something that I place an outside emphasis on it. And there are really good product ideas that I have that there's just not enough meat on the bone for profitability. And so I don't go that route. And I think this dovetails nicely into a discussion about like specifically how I look at the economics of a sale. And there's an exercise I like to do called fail on paper. And this has come from a bunch of product launches that were great products, but there wasn't enough profit margin to make it worthwhile. And so what I like to do is determine what my landed cost is going to be. And that's going to be your unit cost that you pay to the supplier, plus getting that product into a warehouse or into wherever you're shipping it from. And so say that's $10. Say you've got $8 that you're paying to the supplier and $2 that you're paying for shipping and tariffs. Your landed cost is now $10. If I go and look at similar products, unless they're priced 3 times landed cost or more, I will not sell that product. So I need to see a peer group of products selling that are around 30 minimum. And one of the things I really like about Amazon, but really this could go to Shopify or Etsy, is before you ever place your order with a supplier, just about all of your costs are known or knowable. So let me go through that. You can talk to the supplier and get a quote for different quantities. You could figure out what are the dimensions of the product. That's going to be what your FBA fee is going to be. Or if you're self-fulfilling, you could go to the post office and type in the dimensions of your product and see how much shipping is going to be. On Amazon, I always figure about 15% for advertising. And each category is going to have a referral fee. And so before you place your bet, going through that exercise is incredibly valuable. And you don't need to be a CPA to do it. You can do it on a napkin. But what are going to be all of my costs? And is there going to be plenty of profit margin to sustain this business? And so I've had products, going back to our example, of $10 where I've tried to sell for 20, and you're not profitable. You're at break even, and that's no fun.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. All right. So you do your research, right? You figure out what your landed costs are. You look at the profitability, make sure the margins and everything are there. You know what the space looks like and who the competition is. And now you're in this process of launching these products, knowing for every 10, about 3 of those will be, I don't know if those will be hero ASINs, but those will certainly be some more winning products, right? How has this continuous product launch strategy served you? What's that done for the business?
It's been really, really helpful. And I'll tell you, as I have tried to systematize it as best I can. And that starts with product research, then goes into writing your listing, getting your photography done, getting your video done, launching the product, doing pay-per-click advertising. To me, it is easier to launch one product a month than it is one product a year, because you get into a rhythm and you're forced to create a process around it. And so I use a simple spreadsheet that just, I have my product and then I have all of the things that need to be done. I call it my product launch checklist. And, building a system around that has been really, really helpful. And so, when I say that the one brand I was talking about has over 300 SKUs, a lot of times that's color or size variations or 2-packs or things like that. And that's something that I think, if you have a really well-selling a product that sells really well, offer it in a 2-pack. And I think you'd be surprised, even if it doesn't seem like a natural, like if you're selling one dog bone, obviously you'd sell a 2-pack of dog bones, but on apparel or on hats, sell a 2-pack of those. Someone buys one for themselves and for their buddy. And those are really practical ways to grow your catalog and not have to source additional product. And so bundling and continuing to serve the products that are doing really well, I think, is a winning strategy. And you also we can get into upsells. I sell some custom products, and through Amazon Custom, you can have upsells. And so if I'm selling a dog leash, I am going to offer that customer a leash hanger because it's relevant to what they're doing. And not everyone's going to go for that upsell, but about 5% of people do. And so, I think just constantly being in the mode of growing your catalog is really, really helpful.
That's huge. And I love, I think in that last answer, David, you probably touched on 7 different strategies I cover in the book. And that's huge. You've been implementing them, you're seeing the result, and I love that. So something you and I have talked about before, and shifting gears a little bit, is the 80-20 rule. I know you're a huge fan of the 80-20 rule. I mean, you even have one of your companies is named after this 80-20 rule. Tell me more about where the 80-20 rule shows up in your business.
Absolutely. So I would say that 20% of my products generate 80% of net income. And, I've talked in this episode a lot about launching a lot of products. I think one thing that's healthy to do is retire products as well. I talked about the success rate of 10 product launches and how 3 of them are going to be duds. Those are things that, at the end of the year, and it's tough. I feel resistance every time I do this because I've worked so hard to get that product launched. I, did all the research. I read the 1-star reviews. I found a supplier. I got the photos. I did the video. And now it's not working out, and it's killing off one of your children, ASINs. And that's tough to do, but I think that's a healthy thing to do every year. So if you have a dud product, and when I say dud, it's collecting long-term storage fees. It's been in inventory for over 365 days. That is costing you money. Your PPC team will be spending time on it, even though it's not selling really well. Your customer service team can get bogged down by things there. And so I think that's something that looking literally, and it's great with ChatGPT now, you can upload a spreadsheet and say, I want to apply the 80-20 rule. Find the 20% of my products or my customer list or whatever it may be that's producing 80% of the result. And so I would say that definitely comes into play there, but I'm probably going to lose some of the audience here. But to me, the 80-20 rule is a law of the universe. And 80% of the problems in your life are coming from 20% of the sources. If you look at relationships, there's something to it that if I look at a certain aspect of my life and say, how can I apply the 80-20 rule? Usually it's just a good exercise to go through. So to answer your question, where do I apply it? I try to do it everywhere, so much so that my first holding company was called 80-20 Capital, as just a reminder to apply the 80-20 rule. And it's an outstanding book. I can't say enough good things about it.
It's funny. We can nerd out in the numbers, and maybe we'll just follow this tangent for a moment. But the fractal or iterative implementation of the 80-20 rule on the 80-20 rule, I find so fascinating, right? You look at the 20% of your customer base that provides 80% of the revenue. Within that 20%, there's 80-20 and so on. I'm sure you've experienced that too, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're the 80-20 inside the 80-20. And that is if you think of a customer list, you have 20% of 20% of your top customers. Those are the people that, you want to be hitting with promos. You want to be giving out free product to. And I think that ranking process is a really helpful exercise to go through. And so, yeah, huge fan of the 80-20 rule. My wife gets tired of hearing me, talk about it being a rule of the universe, but there's something there.
All right. So continuing on the topic of numbers, as a recovered CPA, you understand, I think, numbers in business more than most. Talk to us about discounts. Do you discount a lot? How do you look at the financials of when you discount products? If you do, does launching new products help to shift you away from discounting? Talk to me about discounting in your world.
Absolutely. So one thing right out of the gate is free shipping. It's a form of a discount, right? And I think that is become the standard. And we all know I could either pay $20 and $5 shipping, or I could pay $25 with 0 shipping. We all know what trick is being played on us, but Amazon has done such a good job of getting into the mind of the consumer that free shipping is kind of assumed. If you look at your conversion rates, going to that example of 20 plus $5 in shipping or 25 with 0 shipping, you'll convert way higher. with free shipping. And so I think that's important for, Etsy sellers, for Shopify sellers. That's something that bake into your cost and offer free shipping. And so, in terms of discounts, one thing I really like doing is those multi-pack deals. And where, if instead of buying 100 for $100, you're going to buy 200 for $180 and 300 for $260. And so I really like those types of discounts. Now, coupons, specifically coupons on Amazon, I've heard mixed results on this. What I've heard is a lot of times when people are clipping coupons, they've already decided I'm going to buy this. And that offering that coupon is not tipping the scales in your favor. But, good shoppers know to check if there's a coupon or not. And so I would say on the topic of discounts, one thing that I've enjoyed doing, and I have a couple products like this, is if the average price is $100, I will find a way to launch a $180 product where I'm at the top. There are people that just like expensive things. And if something is $300, it is going to be better than $100 just because of the price. And I love them as customers. And so I would say, now you obviously have to justify that, right? You have to be offering something that the $100 offerings don't have. It has a handle. It has a carry case. It has a free gift, right? But I really like selling premium products and where discounts are not as prevalent. And so it's something that you see like at restaurants when they have market price. It's kind of like I like that. The people that order market price on a menu, I like selling to them on Etsy and Amazon and selling expensive stuff. And I do think there's pretty good opportunities. And this is a totally different topic, but I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here on selling high priced items. Most Amazon courses would tell you buy something that you can source for $3 or $4 that fits in a backpack on Alibaba and then go sell it on Amazon. And if you look at those product categories, they're saturated. I know a guy that sells snowplows on Amazon, huge, super expensive to move, but he's the guy. And so, oversized, high price, I think there's a land of opportunity there.
I love that. And what's really cool there, David, is I'm hearing for our listeners a few strategies that I love talking about, right? One of them is premium pricing, right? Like nobody wins that race to the bottom. And you position yourself premium in the market, which is fantastic. Second thing I'm hearing there is instead of discounting, right, and just taking a percentage off, you offer a bundle. So in the end, they're buying more, they're saving, but like everyone wins. And the third is instead of going for cheap with add-on fees like shipping, that you bundle and have bonuses at tiers, right? You buy a certain amount and you get free shipping. So you can have premium pricing and there's still a lot higher perceived value. The theme being to always make sure there's value for your buyer. And if it's there, they buy. Cool. All right. I love, you and I are both tactical guys. We like getting into implementation, right? So when you decided we're going to become this product launch machine, right? Launch 2 new products a month. What is the battle tested system that you've talked about? Can you share how you go about launching 2 or more products every single month and just getting it done?
Absolutely. So there's a book called Traction, which I think everybody, whether you own a business or not, should read. I think it'd be helpful for everyone to read. And this book introduces this concept of the entrepreneurial operating system. And what it does is it provides structure and goals and actionable things that you do every month that move the ball forward. And I have implemented this. I do it every year. I'm in my 8th year of doing it, and it makes life easier as a business owner. And it sets out clear rules and responsibilities for team members. It gives scorecards to set expectations and let people know, here's what we need from you and here's why it's important. And, it takes a lofty 3 or 5 year goal and it breaks it down into, okay, what do I need to do each year? And then what do I need to do each quarter and each month? And then we make scorecards and make sure all those things get done. And so that has been outstanding. And what I'll add is with AI, you can have it be your EOS implementation coach. And I have really enjoyed like traction plus AI it's like steroids in baseball. I mean, they just hit the ball farther. It's a better way to do it. And so I've really enjoyed that. Long ago, I paid, I think, 10 grand for an implementer to come in. And based on my recent interactions with Entrepreneurial Operating System and ChatGPT, I would say that implementation is not as necessary. It's an easier DIY project when you have AI by your side.
Love it. So with AI by your side and knowing you want to launch these, multiple products a month, what does a product launch look like for you in the business? Like, can you just high level walk us through figuring out what you want to launch to the point it's launched and out there in the world and selling well?
Absolutely. My goal is, if you think of like a marble going through a marble course, it's always in motion. And if you think of that marble course as all of the steps that you need to take to launch, your goal as a business owner should be to push that marble forward and for it to continue rolling forward without your involvement. And so what I've done is I have a spreadsheet. It's called the Product Launch Machine. And it has like 60 steps of all of the things that need to be done. Here's what needs to be done on product research. Here are the questions that you need to ask your supplier. Here's what we need to negotiate for our first order, all the way through logistics and getting that product into sellable form. And this is an ever evolving process. So each step has a Loom video, which is just a screen recording. You can use any screen recording software, but of me instructing, here's how you do it. And here's what's important. And here's what you want to be on the lookout for. And when we launch a product, that we use that checklist. And, if I have a new team member or somebody that, has done that part of the process, they have a video to lean on. I've been revamping the product launch machine with AI. It's made product launches a lot easier. But yeah, that's what the process looks like. And so my goal is to say, I'm interested in launching this product, and I push that marble forward. And the goal for it to be in sellable format in Amazon without me interfering at all. Now, I've got visibility throughout the whole process. I'm the one sending the wires to the supplier. So it's not I'm not completely on autopilot, but I try to rely on the team as much as I can. And when I get pulled in, I know I have a break in my process.
All right. So that product launch machine you have now with those 60 steps all laid out wasn't there in the beginning. As you've iterated over the years to get to those 60 steps and record the videos and all that, like what were some of the fires you faced or challenges you saw in launching products that you've fixed now with the current version of the system?
Yeah, I would say like quality control is something that has been in like a QC, a quality check process, has been something that's been critical. And it is rare to hire somebody that cares as much about your business as you do. And so, you take infographics, for example. Like, to me, that is a representation of the product and of our company. If there's a misspelled word, that drives me nuts. Or if, something looks cheesy or is photoshopped on it, that drives me nuts. And so establishing checkpoints at different parts of this marble run analogy that I'm going to continue going with, for instance, like we do an exercise where we look at average sales price of competitors, and that fail on paper exercise I talked about. There's a checkpoint there where I like to jump in and say, this doesn't look good product, probably not going to be profitable. Let's move on. Or, hey, can you look into this or that? And so I like to be involved there. On negotiating, I like to be involved there. And then on the QC process, nothing is posted without me putting my eyes on it. And, misspellings, you can upload infographics to ChatGPT and say, find any misspellings. And so, all of those things are done before they get to me. But I like inserting myself in that process just so I can keep my finger on the pulse of the business.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is there's a number of things that would impact the brand negatively or lead to really a poor outcome, but you put the checkpoints in to have visibility. And when you haven't, you, after the fact, put that kind of checkpoint in.
Absolutely.
Nice. So one of the topics that you have, I think, a lot of expertise around is helping clients to improve the low conversion rates and poor retention rates. And like reducing churn is vital for customer lifetime value, but like in the world of Amazon, Etsy, Shopify, and so on, like how do you measure customer lifetime value and keep customers coming back?
Yeah, so it is a really difficult thing to quantify as an Amazon seller. And if you look at the data that you have visibility into, they've started hiding customer name. Now you just have a shipping address, or you'll have customer name for 30 days and then that window closes. And so even to figure out who are my repeat customers is a challenging thing. And so I would say there are some universal truths here. If you increase your average order value, your customer lifetime value goes up. Typically. So what do I mean by that? Selling higher priced products, bundling, offering big quantity discounts, all of those things increases the amount of money that people are paying at the end of their transaction. That typically is a win. And so I think when you're running an e-commerce company, knowing your customer acquisition cost is very important, and knowing your customer lifetime value is very important. And I have not found a good way to do it on Amazon, to be honest with you. And so, but I do push for higher priced products and things like that.
I want to dig into that a little more, right? As you started offering higher priced products, expanding the product portfolio, right? Offering the bundles, the upsells, and all those things. What were some of the additional benefits you saw? It sounds like certainly an increased customer lifetime value. What else? Did you attract different clientele? What were some of the side benefits to doing what you did?
Yeah, I think you do with higher priced products do attract better clientele and people that are easier to work with. And if I look at, I'll call them the Karens, the people that really get in, they'll leave you a 1-star review, but are just malicious. Like they really want to twist the knife, right? If I look at all of those that I've received in my career of selling on Amazon and other platforms, a lot of those have been on $20 and below products. And there seems to be the top end of the market, they seem to be more pleasant to deal with. This has just been my experience than some of the lower price products. And if you look at, selling $100 product versus a $20 product, the amount of work that it takes to sell a $20 product is about the same amount of work as it is to sell a $100 product. Shipping might be more expensive, but of course you're taking all of that into account. And so I do think it's easier serving the top end of this market.
Nice. All right. So for fellow business owners out there who are feeling stuck or like they're facing a plateau, based on your experience, having been through this before and breaking through, like what advice would you have for folks on how to break through or get back to product launches?
If you have a business that has been running, I would stop and do the 80-20 rule. What 20% of the things that I've done since starting this business has produced 80% of the results, and do more of that. And so that may be a particular type of product that has worked, or a particular marketplace that has worked. But what helps me is and this is communicated to the team, is we have a quota. We're launching 5 products in the month of August. And we are going to do everything in our power to push all 5 of those across the finish line. That's clearly communicated to the team. And we set up our processes to serve that. And so that, with 5 product launches, that may mean that we're looking at 100 different products to figure out what we want to do there. And so I would say clearly communicating to your team, if you do have one, is helpful. And you may have a VA that works 5 hours a week. Tell them. But I think that's something that is kind of, as a solopreneur, you don't have a boss who's micromanaging you. And you kind of need to set up systems to manage yourself. And a quota is a good way to do that. It's, those are within your power to move the processes along to where you can hit those targets. And then sharing them with people spreads that accountability out across the team, which is great.
So this dovetails nicely into like what I promise is hopefully our last question around numbers, right? At least half the calls you and I have had together over the years end up in screen sharing and us looking through a Google Sheet together of some sort. Like we love our sheets and stats, our funnel stats, our KPIs, like all of it. What are like some of the KPIs or key performance indicators you look at in your business or on product launches or in general to measure how well you and the team are doing? You mentioned quotas, but like what else?
Absolutely. So one thing that I really like to look at is gross profit after ad spend. And so that's going to be your revenue minus your expense, your cost of goods sold, price of the product, price of shipping, minus Amazon fees or Shopify fees or whatever that may be, minus ad spend. I like to look at that. And to me, there are a ton of products that on the surface seem profitable. And then you look at the amount of ad spend that they have to spend to generate that level of sales, and they're at break even or, below, which is a bad situation to be in. And so that's something that I'm, for a healthy product in e-commerce today, you would be at 30% minimum for after your gross margin after ad spend. And so one of the things that, and I've learned this a lot since working with Build, Grow, Scale, is conversion rate, especially on a D2C website. And, a conversion rate of 1 means you have 100 visitors that come to your website, but one of them buys. And when you focus on that, if you can have 3 visitors out of that 100 convert, you have drastically changed your company because you have 3 times the amount of sales with the same amount of ad spend or whatever you're doing to drive traffic to that website. And so, at Build, Grow, Scale, we work with some pretty big, really successful companies. And one thing that I've learned from those business owners is they are dialed in on conversion rate. And that's something that they're always looking at. And so I would say ad spend. Ad spend's another one where, especially on Amazon, pay to play platform. And I have had a lot of instances personally where I've sold at break even. And I made a vow, I'm done doing that. And my goal is to run a profitable company.
Nice. Well, on that, David, I think it makes sense for us to tie this all together for our listeners. To recap, what I'm hearing is you found growth and products that the market wanted, but then you got stuck. And had you not changed, you'd have ended up out of business and bankrupt. The key to getting unstuck was returning to product launches, as they helped not just bring in new customers, but they would bring your existing customers back for additional purchases. Nicely, nicely done. For our listeners who want to learn more about you, where should they go right now?
Absolutely. Check out Firing the Man on social media and on YouTube. And if you're interested in Amazon consulting services, I've built a really, really good team over the last 7 years and now partnering up with brands to get my team plugged in and help them crush it on Amazon. So if you're interested in that, you can book a call with me at calendly.com/firingtheman/Amazon.
Fantastic. David, thank you so much for joining us. I always love when we get to catch up and hear what you're working on. You're an inspiration to us all, and I appreciate you joining us on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.